I'm not hearing anything. Why is it? No.
Oh, they're not ready.
Okay, okay,
The-
We want to say happy July
okay.
26th, happy Independence Day to all of you. Today is July 26th, 2022, and this is the 175th Independence Day celebration of our dear country, Liberia. We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. This is a special edition of the Liberia History Channel. Our presenter is Carl Famule. Carl, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's always my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And Mohammed is my co-presenter or is my co-host here tonight. No, not tonight. Tonight, Mohammed is in the hot seat. Mohammed, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and thank you to our viewers.
And also happy 26th. And welcoming for the first time on Focus on Liberia is Ayume Julate Cassell. Ayume, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you for having me. Thank you, Carl, and thank you, Mohammed. Happy 26th, everybody.
Happy 26th. And for those of you who are joining us, it is not a bad idea at all to give me 26. So my 26 and we should have had our show last Saturday, but we thought it wise to move it to today, which is actually July 26th. And we're going to be talking about the founding fathers of Liberia. So Carl is part of a group called the Liberia History Guild, and Mohammed and Ayume are also part of that group. So before we even start the discussion, we've Carl invited them here tonight to be part of this very special discussion. We are all Liberians, so on Flag Day, on National Independence Day, we are talking about independence. We want to look at our founding fathers. So there are some of our friends who have been actually digging into these stories, and they are all part of the Liberia History Guild. Carl, why don't talk a little bit about the Liberia History Guild and introduce your colleagues here with us tonight?
Sure. So the Liberian History Guild was established in 2018 as kind of like a history book club where we rummage through our local library archives, our university library archives, and just, look for information and research and study it together. And so it's sort of informal, but it's for people who love history and love Liberia and are trying to, document primary sources. One of the things that the Liberian History Guild has been very successful in doing is the digitization of rare documents so that they're free and available to everyone. So we've not really done a lot of that in the last year and a half, but when we first started, that was a big push. And we're going to probably get back into doing more of that in the near future. But Mohammed is a very, very brilliant Liberian. He's a professional social worker, advocate, community advocate, mentor, just all around wonderful human being. Lives in Australia as a leader in his community and has done a lot to enrich my life as a friend of his, as far as his perspectives are always extremely well thought out. He's a thinking person and critical thinker, and that is greatly appreciated. And that's one of the reasons I wanted Mohammed on here as a proud son of Liberia to present his perspective on our founding. And then AMA Cassell, who is the daughter of my late father's good friend, by the way. But I didn't know her growing up. I met her as an adult. But our late fathers were very good friends, very educated, very respected men. And I think one of the things that I appreciate about this sister is that she seems to carry her father's fire the same way I carry my father's fire. And people don't realize that daughters do that. They sometimes will inherit their father's energy and vision and be the torchbearer of their fathers. And she is a kindred spirit of mine in that sense. Very, very brilliant woman. She is an activist. also residing in Australia. Not that all the members of the History Guild live in Australia, just so happens that these two do. But yeah, she's an activist. She's a community advocate. Just an all around. She's a herbalist. She studies plants and she studies their healing qualities. And she's basically an earth scientist and studies, well, I mean, that's what it is, right? You're studying plants, you're studying nature, you're studying rocks and stones and energy. This is science. And so don't diminish that. That's exactly what it is. I mean, it's the foundation of everything human beings know is the study of the earth and everything else. So I, commend both of you and welcome to the Liberian History Channel. Mohammed, you've been here before, AMA. Welcome for your first visit. Hopefully not your last. And we're going to just, we're going to dive into this. I want us to just talk about these things naturally and give opportunities for people to call in. And that's it.
Thank you. And you made welcome in a very special way. We want to welcome our viewers from across the globe. And this is our Independence Day. Let's start by first of the whole idea of Liberia Independence Day. Anytime there's independence, there's a discussion on social media. The first is people were asking as I read through, they say, why independent? We're never colonized. Why is it that we have Independence Day? So let's begin with that very foundation. What does independence mean?
So it basically means sovereignty. It basically means that you're establishing a sovereign state. And the fact that Liberia was really established as almost like a reservation, a castaway reservation for people of African descent that could not thrive in the United States. Some similar to Sierra Leone, was under the protection of, when I say Sierra Leone, I'm talking about the country, I'm talking about the colony of Sierra Leone, the colony of Freetown, which was established by the Sierra Leone Company, which was a private entity that ACS was modeled after. And the colony at Freetown predated Liberia. So it was established before Liberia was established as a colony. So when we say colony, colony has two definitions. Colony means a settlement of people in a foreign place. Definition two is a political colony, which is the imposition of political power by a foreign country onto another. In the context of Liberia and the Freetown colony, this is before Sierra Leone was politically colonized after the partitioning of Africa. So we're talking about the 1700s when Sierra Leone was established, Freetown was established. They were colonies in the first definition, settlements of people, and that was it. So this was not under British rule or American rule as far as political extensions of the state, but more of a colony controlled by private entities. In the case of Sierra Leone, the Sierra Leone Company. In the case of Liberia, the American Colonization Society, and all the other colonization societies that sprung up almost immediately. So you had the Mississippi Colonization Society and so on. So we've talked about that in great detail in other episodes of this show. But just for those who have never seen the show before, that's what that really means. So colony is in that context.
And Ayume, I know you've heard that before, almost every Liberian. Oh, why independence? So if anything to add, that Liberia gained or independence, for some people, you should be colonized, you should be in bondage, and then you have independence. What will you tell us about the independence of Liberia? What's your take?
My take on the independence of Liberia was literally like what the sister just said. These were people that had come under the umbrella of former slaves owners, and they have come from a lot of oppression, a lot of dehumanizing, found a land that they wanted to be sovereign. People ruled themselves, proved that they could govern themselves and have every inherent rights that every human is entitled to. So our independence was just like, look, we're getting on out of your umbrella. We want to be independent, a sovereign nation, as the
Yes.
word independent in every way possible. So, I'm really, really happy they did that. I'm proud of that.
And
Awesome.
Mohammed, Carl used the word sovereignty. So if we were to begin a country at that point, there should be a point. Call it independence you want, call it launching of the country you want. But if you look at independence from that perspective, you must begin as a country. You must have your own sovereignty. Talk to me more about Liberia gaining its independence or being now a country on its own.
Thank you very much. And yes, I like the way you put a question that if you're thinking about Guinea independent, you must think about sovereignty. When does that start? Well, for us, it started 1847. And in the declaration document, they actually documented it. They said there was an agreement between those people, founders, and the ACS, that when we're able to root ourselves, do things by ourselves, you're going to delegate the delegated power we gave you, you're going to give it back to us. And in 1846, they actually tried to do that officially to say, yeah, we're going to give you back the delegated power. You start yourself as a nation, self governing people in 1847. So that's what it is. And if you understand it that way, we are now 175 years old, not 100 and now 200 years old,
Oh,
175 years old.
hmm.
And that's where we
I
are
know
today.
where you're
And
going with
yeah,
that.
and okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you. So it is clear, those watching us, that's what Liberia's independence means. Now, to have independence, there were people that started all this, and we call them founding fathers. When I said this, I asked the question, what's about the mothers? Being the last child of my mother, so I always think of mothers. Call, why founding fathers? Why not mothers?
So this is a Western context of power. There's a couple things that we want to establish. When you're talking about history, you have to put yourself into the time period. There was no women's suffrage movement in the United States, in the Western world, in the European concept of power and politics. Only dealing with monarchies do you have women in decision-making roles. But outside of that, when it comes to a secular state, women did not have any authority. So what ends up happening is women don't have a right to vote or participate in politics in the United States in the 1800s, in England, in France, and any modern republic. But I do need to mention something extremely important. So there's two things that I want us to talk about before we even start talking about those who established the state. In our traditional systems on the Grain Coast, we are made up of multiple nations. Some are less centralized than others. We've talked about this in the past. In our northern central territory of Liberia, which is now Bokulu, Lofa, Nimba, Bong, the culture of the Mende ethnic groups was one of balance of political power before the influence of Islam. This is very important. So women could rise to the position of chiefs, zos, and elders. Traditional African governance systems and structures, especially with our empires in West Africa, in Western Sudan, as we call it, which is basically what is now Mali, Senegambia, that whole area, Ghana, Mali, Songhai. The tradition was you had a 3-layered governmental structure. And it even goes further back than this, to more ancient times, but this is a more modern rendition of it. So what you would have is you'd have the monarchy, which is analogous to the executive branch of government. So you have the king. Let's talk about Mansa Musa Kankan, for example. He would be the executive. And then you have, in our traditional governmental structures, what is analogous to a legislature, which is a council of elders and wealthy, powerful people. And then you have the spiritual leaders, So with the Islamic states, this would be the Muslim clergy, the high-ranking imams of the society, of the empire. These would be the judges. These would be the people who would dispense justice. So our governmental structure has always looked like that. And so when people try to say, oh, we borrowed the American government, no, American democracy borrowed African tradition. And this is well documented. They don't have a history of this. Even the Greek democratic process was not three-layered the way that this system is. So this is actually natural to us. And you hear a lot of people saying sometimes, they say, oh, you know, they'll call the House of Representatives a house of wise men. This is not an accident. This is how we've structured our power checks and balances so that one person or one group of individuals doesn't carry all the weight on their shoulders. So you have that aspect of it. Now, one thing that Mohammed said that is well documented, but I dispute. So he's not wrong, I just dispute it, which is that there was an agreement that they would turn over power, because it was never truly the intent for them to have actual political sovereignty, but really to be their proxies when they were ready. And that is clear in the laws that preceded, and also the draft laws that were the draft constitution that was created by Greenfield, that was basically dismantled and redone. Hillary Teague was such a militant. He was like, no, we're not going to be your proxies. You're not going to be our overseers. We're going to sever ties in every way, and we're going to govern ourselves completely. So when they say that we're going to turn things over, it was similar to Joseph Jenkins Roberts being a governor under ACS rule. That's what they were talking about, South rule, where he was still answerable to this body of men called the American Colonization Society. The idea that the Africans had, the African Americans, the repatriated Africans had, was to not be proxy extensions of some board sitting in New York, but to be in their God-given rights, full-fledged, self-determinate human beings, without having to answer to other men. That is the difference in the interpretation, because when you look at the laws that they wrote for the Commonwealth, it was never really full sovereignty. So it was more, you know, you will be our delegates, and you will, that's what they considered self-governance. You will be the face of our power, but it was still their power. It was still their power, whether it has your face or not. So that is the distinction.
And how long was that supposed to continue in their minds?
Indefinitely, just like it did with colonialism. When they structured colonialism, it was indefinitely. And even when they allowed, you know, after the pressure, after World War II, when Europe was weak and Africans started asserting themselves and demanding their independence, you know, in the 1950s and 60s, what happened? They said, yes, but is it really independence? Is it real sovereignty? Or is it proxy governance? So we're going to talk about that as well.
Right. And before we delve into the topic of the day, the founding fathers, one last thing I want to lay the premise here is people continue to ask, why is it that Liberia, that we are celebrating July 26th with all the issues we have? In fact, we don't produce this. We don't have our own days. We are not doing this. Why are we celebrating? What do you say to them?
So the fact that we exist with all of the obstacles that have been put forth against us, with the embargoes and the sabotage and the war and the internal division and strife, our existence is a miracle, and it's something to be celebrated. It presents for us hope. It presents for us an opportunity greater than hope, the opportunity to do something and manifest the destiny of Liberia. Liberia is a vision. It is a dream deferred. It has not yet been accomplished. It is a work in process, and it is our responsibility to pick up the torch that is still lit and carry it forward instead of complaining that it wasn't carried far enough. The fact that we have something to carry forward at all is something to be grateful for. It's something to celebrate. And that's why you see all the children in Liberia, everybody know why the pot boiling, the pot not boiling, people wearing the red, white, and blue. They're running around Happy Independence Day because we have a home. We are not homeless. We come from somewhere, and we should be happy and proud of that. And we should make it what it was intended to be. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What was it intended to be? What was the intent? What was the dream that has been deferred?
Mohammed and Ayume, let me get your thoughts on that quickly, and then we start.
Ooh.
I think.
Okay, you go. You should.
No, women for you go. If I do mine, I'll be leaving after that. Yeah.
Oh, like we have these conversations all the time. So when Cole said these things, it's just my heart just like, because why are we celebrating? We're celebrating the fact that we are. There was a time we were not. We're celebrating the fact that two group of people that were once upon a time brothers that got lost joined together on the land to make that land against all odds that we became. They dare to dream because they believe in us. So, too much to celebrate. Too much.
Too much.
Fact
Too
that
much.
we are.
We're still
Too much.
here.
You don't have time for the amount of things that we got to celebrate. Too much. The fact that we're here. Yeah.
Thank you, Mohammed. Quickly, and then you can take.
Yeah, I'm just gonna build on what they've already said regarding the fact that we are here. We need to celebrate, but I want to bring in some of the very distinct power they were fighting, the different interests they're trying to navigate in order to put us where we are today. It's very profound. In my layman understanding, I identified about 5 different powers they were trying to navigate. There was the issue of the America, the superpower, and how they're trying to get themselves like your hand in the lion's mouth. You're trying to remove it from there little by little without being eaten. They fought that and they documented that. You could see the power of them at the time. It was also the power of the religious group that thought, you know what, this is a heaven they want to create for whatever thing they want to do. And not any other religious group. Many of those people who were influenced, what I learned from my professor, by the clan, how you call that? The Ku Klux Klan.
The Ku Klux Klan.
And their own particular point of view with the white supremacy underneath that. So that was a power on top of us, the maneuver to get us from. There was also the manipulation of Professor Greenleaf and his idea about how Liberia is supposed to be. He went on drafting his own kind of constitution that will subjugate us throughout everlasting way. And these guys managed to navigate their way through that. And finally, the power, the manipulation of the American Colonization Society itself. That was the prophet talk about. They started telling our people, we'll leave all the governance to you, but we'll give only the governor as a leader. You'll do everything, and he will cut the case. Then he will report to us. Then those sort of people who drafted this, who are the founders of Liberia, those founding fathers, they navigated their way through all of those powers and interests until they gave us what they're giving us. The moment I understood that, I said, wow, this really, really desired celebration. That's why I sincerely celebrate the July 26th now.
Thank you. And so if you see my red, white, and blue, the blue is my pen. So that's why you don't see it. But that's why we celebrate. And that's why. So let's go into our founding fathers.
Yes. So this is a list of the people, the men who drafted the Constitution of Liberia. These are the men who drafted the Constitution. We're going to just quickly talk about them. AMA, you can jump in when you want to. Let's start with Samuel Benedict, who was the president, as they called him, the head of the Constitution Committee.
Um, Sammy Benedict.
Go to the next slide,
First
please,
of,
Dennis.
you said
Let,
I was
let,
asking Dennis to go to the next slide.
okay.
let's distinguish that the Constitution, then we have the Declaration of Independence,
Right,
right? So which one we're talking about?
both.
Okay.
So the Declaration of Independence was written by Hillary Teach. Hillary Teague wrote the Declaration of Independence. Hillary Teague, as I say, but Teague, as it's pronounced in Liberia, but African Americans, pronounce the name Teague, which is probably how he pronounced his own name. But Hillary Teague, with a hard G, probably, he wrote this. It's part of the Constitution. It was presented with the Constitution. So what we're talking about here is a committee of men who gathered to draft the laws of the Republic, and declare its independence.
Let's go, Ayumi. So we start with Samuel Benedict, Monserrado County.
Who's going across?
So would you like me to, you can just jump in when you want. So Sam Benedict was born in 1792. So he was a politician. He was also a jurist, which basically means that he was a lawyer, educated. He was actually born into slavery here in the state of Georgia. Emigrated to Liberia around 1833. And so the other thing I want you all to think about is you had immigrants coming in on various ships. If you've watched previous episodes, it wasn't just one, group of people. So on this committee, there were two people that were original foundation immigrants from the United States, and that's Hillary Teague and Elijah Johnson. The rest of these gentlemen came afterwards. So this is something I want you to note. And most of them, these were men who were educated. They were clergymen, meaning they were, pastors, missionaries. So they were lettered. They read. They read not only just the Bible, but many other philosophical books. So these were very, very enlightened people. This is contrary to what people think and what people have been told that I've interacted with. These were not, your average. These were not average people. These were people that were distinguished in education and had positioned themselves and distinguished themselves academically. And then we go on to Hillary Teague. He was born in 1802, died in 1853. So sometimes his name is spelled Teage, and that's, I think, where they get the Teague pronunciation, but the Teague is what's written in documents upon his departure, is how it's spelled. He was born in Virginia and was known for his oratory skills. So he was a brilliant orator. He could speak and motivate and command and inspire people. So he was an advocate for Liberian independence from the moment he arrived. To double back to previous episodes, when the Elizabeth landed at Sherbrooke in 1821, many of those on the Elizabeth refused to go forward to Cape Mesurado when that land acquisition was completed because they did not want to live under the tyranny of ACS. So many of them chose to remain in Sierra Leone, and later on, their descendants would have been colonized with the partitioning of Africa, and they are now citizens of the Republic of Sierra Leone today, the independent republic. So Hillary Teague and Elijah Johnson were two of those who chose to move forward with ACS reluctantly. And Hillary Teague wanted to establish himself. He felt that African people should be governing themselves. And you have to remember, when they were at Sierra Leone, there was no colonization yet. People, they would see African chiefdoms and sovereign Africans self-governing and trading equally with other people. To further express this oppression of ACS, or how ACS thought so little of these very educated men, when they went to go negotiate along the coast with sovereign Africans for land, they took not one African American repatriate with them. Although these men were literate, although these men were brilliant and more educated than Eli Ayers. I mean, than Captain Stockton. Ayers was a doctor, but Stockton wasn't. He was no genius. So some of these agents were not even as educated as the Africans that they were controlling. This is important to note. So Teague was this guy. He was a troublemaker. He was the guy who was not going to bow to what they were doing. And we always ask the question, Sierra Leone had the repatriation movement before Liberia did. It was established before Liberia. And people always ask, well, why didn't Sierra Leone become independent? Sierra Leone, if Hillary Teague, this is my assumption, maybe if he had remained at Sherbrooke, maybe Sierra Leone would be the first republic in Africa. Because these things are determined by human beings. And he had that fire of freedom in him. It wasn't enough to be on African soil. He had to be sovereign. He had to be self-determinant. So Hillary Teague also, in his writings, you see the early stages of Pan-Africanism.
And Cole, if I can stop you, it's important that you mentioned that distinction between Liberia and Sierra Leone, because we have that common history of ex-slaves coming and landing there. But Sierra Leone ended up being colonized by the British, and Liberia wasn't.
Yeah, first of all, I wouldn't call repatriated Africans ex-slaves, because many of them were born free. And many of the people that were repatriated to both Sierra Leone and Liberia were actually recaptured Africans who had never even left Africa.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful when we use this word on human beings. They were enslaved Africans, descendants of enslaved Africans from America, who repatriated to Africa. And yes, when Sierra Leone was the first. I mean, Liberia for Freetown was the first settlement. So they didn't establish Freetown to become an independent country. That wasn't the idea. These people didn't respect the humanity of the people living on the continent of Africa enough to recognize them as sovereign partners in humanity. That's what sovereignty really means. Sovereignty isn't just about, leave us alone. Sovereignty is interact with us as equals. We're going to trade with you. We're going to do business with you. You're going to respect our laws when you come to our ports. We're going to respect your laws when we go to your ports, right? We're going to have our own economic self-determination, and we're not going to be exploited. We are going to partner and trade. And so that is what sovereignty meant for Hillary Teague. That's what sovereignty meant for these men who established the republic. And one last thing, one of the myths, the great myths, so you're talking about a time period before the partitioning of Africa. So most of the Africans they're interacting with are sovereign people, self-governing people. Many of the powerful Africans they're interacting with are heavily engaged in this transatlantic slave trade. Also regional slave trade and regional use of slaves as porters for their goods and their other economic ventures. The use of forced labor or enslaved people for agricultural projects. So slavery in the context of Africa was rampant, and there were extremely powerful African people all around them. So they had examples of African men and women with extreme power and wealth. So the idea is not the situation where they're coming into a place and everyone is just, running around with grass skirts on and beating drums. They come and they recognize the complex, advanced trade networks, civilized interactions, and the diversity of ethnicity in the region. They see it. and they write about it.
Right. And I want Ayume and Mohammed to jump in at any time. So that's Teague. Let's go to Elijah Johnson.
Elijah Johnson.
And Cole, before we even move forward, I understand with anyway, we'll get to the other people, right? To see what role they played before this the signing of the Declaration of Independence and writing the Constitution. I see Teague, I see Elijah Johnson. I don't see much maybe I've not read much about the other people. So I'll be interested in what they did prior to this time.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that. I mean, they're all listed. A lot of some people have more documented history than others.
A lot of, yeah.
There's one particular person who I believe is a Bassa man, but I'll get into that. That's what I'm trying to research and try to find him, because there's just a lot of, whenever you start to see where you don't have a history of someone landing on the ship, it usually means they're from right there. So there's some of these things, are not discussed, but we'll get into that. Emma, which ones did you want to talk about, Elijah or somebody else?
I would like to talk about John Day.
Okay.
His stories intrigues me a little bit.
Okay, so when we get to John Day, okay, let me just quickly about Elijah. He was born in 1789. He died, just after independence, a couple years. He was one of the first colonial agents of the American Colonization Society. So you have to remember the colonial agents were basically missionaries. These were African Americans that were educated, they were clergy. Elijah Johnson himself was a Methodist minister. You had the Baptist minister, Lot Carey, we've talked about extensively on this program. So a lot of the agents were basically African men. In the case of Lot Carey, full-blooded African man. In the case of Elijah Johnson, he's described as mixed race, having, but he was born, his birthplace and birth records are a little bit shady. Some say New Jersey, some say New York. He was born on the East Coast, in New Jersey, New York area. He served as a soldier in the War of 1812. So Elijah Johnson was a military person. So he was one of those people who was able to protect the colony militarily. And we've talked about in previous episodes about the stirring of people, inciting of people against the colony in order to protect the institution of slavery. And so Theodore Connoe, a famous slave trader, writes about this a lot in his book. It was very easy to incite indigenous people against the colony, because they would convince them that they're going to stop their economic activity. So Elijah Johnson was one of the militia. That's what he did, before this thing. Besides being a missionary, because he was a trained soldier, he was one of those who trained others to protect the colony.
Oh, Elijah Johnson.
Yeah, that's not remember this man.
And John Lewis?
Yeah. So this guy, he signed there's a John Lewis Jr., a John Nostelaw Jr., who I think this Nostelaw name is not, this name is not European. This name is not Western. This name is not biblical. It's not Hebrew. It's not from America. There's no record of this name on any voyages to Liberia. So there is a John Nostelaw Lewis Jr., who was a medical doctor who considered himself to be a Bassa man. So I don't really know, there's a little foggy area around here. I want to find out more information about him. I want to believe that John Nesselaw Lewis Jr. was his son. His son is saying that he's a Bassa man, and he was born, that he was an indigenous Liberian. So there's not anything about him in any of the voyages. So we do need to do more research on John. Unless he changed his name when he got to Liberia, but
yeah, that's possible.
It's really not. Why would he do that? I mean, it would be strange, right?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
I mean, it's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely, right? So it's, and then why would there be a junior saying he's Bassa? Did he adopt a Bassa boy who took his name, or was his biological son? I don't know. Who wants to talk about John Griffin? He was you want to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead. No, you can go ahead, because I just something I wanted to say about him that I really
No, then go ahead. I've been talking, please.
No, sorry. Just to get in the mindset of our people at that time, and what pressure they were under and how they did it. He was educated, right? He was born of free men, 1809, very educated. He was a legislator, he was a pastor, he was a judge. But before migrating to Liberia, he was a carpenter. How can this man of such education be a carpenter? So it just says the mindset that they were all hungry to be their own people, to exhibit their talents, to exhibit their geniuses in their own land and become a sovereign people. That's what I wanted to say about him. And I admire that.
Yes. So John, he was from South Carolina. Very educated. On the rosters, manifest for the ships, when they would just put literate, and they wouldn't go into any further detail, reads and writes. Some of these people were not just literate; they were, Baptist ministers. Some of them were lawyers. Some of them understood things. They were educated beyond literacy. Philosophers. So that's a very important point. They also brought other skills. And then one of the things that they did was transfer their skills to people. So you have to remember that the majority of the people that were living in these colonies were indigenous Liberians. That's the other myth, that there was some kind of segregation or apartheid at this point in history. That didn't happen. You also have to remember another group of people that outnumbered the African Americans were the recaptured Africans. So the greatest population are the indigenous Liberians. And then the second greatest population is the recaptured Africans, which are the people who were rescued from slave ships. Most of the ships did not arrive in the New World, but some of them did, like the case of the people who settled in New Georgia. They were kept at tribunal for 3 years before returning to Africa, and they were resettled in Liberia. Same thing used to happen with Sierra Leone. So the recaptured Africans, like the CTO King, the father of Charles D.B. King, these are the people that came from, what is now Nigeria and places like that. Those people outnumbered the African Americans. And then much later, after independence, you start having Caribbean and other people come as well, and even more diversity added to the whole pot. So I need to mention that because they're coming into a situation. This is literally like a melting pot of African culture. So not only do you have indigenous Liberians.
Can I just ask a question over there? And the question is about addressing a particular myth. And someone asked a question he said, was there any participation of the indigenous people in the Declaration of Independence? So I'm saying, based on what you just said, there were layers of groups there. The indigenous people were the majority, followed by the recaptured African, and then before the Afro-Americans. But in the Declaration of Independence, they said the people of the Republic of Liberia, originally inhabitants of the United States.
Hillary T. wrote that,
now,
yes.
Would that be, and from the document, you can see that they didn't have any bad intention to exclude someone. But the tools that needed to establish a republic where everyone can fit in there, they had the tools. They had the education.
Yeah.
They could speak the language the people spoke. They could stand the people that the indigenous people couldn't do. So they faced them. They work it out for the nation to be established and everybody be included.
Yes.
And then some people mistake that the nation was formed merely to promote Christianity as a myth. So what do you have to say on that? Yeah, I don't. They
Yeah.
didn't have any
So
bad intention. It was yeah.
so yes, I mean, there was no need for sovereign Africans to establish a westernized republic. There was no need for sovereign
No.
Africans to establish a westernized republic. That need came out of the oppression of African people who resided in America. What Hillary Teej is saying in that declaration is, what we are establishing here is an asylum for oppressed African people. I want you to also know that there were oppressed African people in Africa, on the Grain Coast. When Reverend R.R. Gurley, testified in front of the U.S. Congress on September 14, 1850, this is just 3 years after independence,
Yes.
he said there were 80,000 indigenous, well, what he called native people who made up the citizens of the new republic. 80,000, and there were only 7,000 African Americans, descendants of African Americans in 1850 and recaptured Africans combined. I want you to think about this. 80,000 is what he's estimating. And so remember, the settlement is only on the coast.
Yeah.
So Reverend R.R. Gurley, he testified on the 14th of September, 1850, and again on September 16, 1850, to the U.S. Congress to discuss what was going on in Liberia after independence. So this false narrative that they were able to build a fortress around their little selves and keep everyone out is absurd. It doesn't even make any rational sense. And out of those 80,000 people, you're talking about people who are converting to Christianity, people who are learning how to read and write. They're going to these schools that are being set up all over the place. They're assimilating. Most of those people that were the early citizens, we look all in Congo. Who were these early citizens? When they liberated Trade Town, and there were almost 1,000 indigenous people just at Trade Town that were getting ready to get shipped across into slavery, where do you think those people went? They went to go live in the colonies. And they followed the pattern that they would follow with recaptured Africans, which is to assimilate them, baptize them, give them Western names, all of that kind of thing. So a lot of those people, or even King Peter, his clan, when they sought refuge from Getamba's attack against the Dey, where did they go? They settled at Cape Mesurado. They were absorbed in the settlement. I always joke that there's a lot of people thinking their ancestors came on one ship and they're Dey. There's a lot of people thinking their ancestors came on one ship and they're Bassa. They were liberated from Trade Town. They were almost shipped, to Brazil or Cuba. They were almost shipped by the Portuguese or the Spaniards. And here they are, the descendants today, walking around with these Western names thinking that they came to Liberia on one ship. Many people are in that situation. But I digress. The notion that there was apartheid in the early stages is absurd. What the problem was, what the issue was there was two things happening. You had sovereign African kingdoms that did not want to give up their power, and to some old funny looking, funny talking African people on the coast, some of whom were extremely rare. Rare, they look like white people. Joseph Jenkins Roberts, then they were weird to them. They didn't want to be bothered with these people. And why would you give up your power? Oh, Mohammed, have a good day if you're still listening. Thanks for
Oh,
joining me. Yeah, he had to go to a
bye,
meeting.
Mom. Yeah. Bye,
So,
Mom.
so to just, to touch on Mohammed's point, you have to always remember the context of the time period. Does this mean that they didn't discriminate against people who came in, and practiced idolatry? Of course they did. You cannot come into the settlement with your, and build your shrines and continue your practices, because it was an affront to the Christian, uppity Christian way of life of the 19th century, talking about the 1800s here. These people were extremely conservative. You couldn't be in their community without your bra on. You had to cover yourself up. If you're gonna, we'll adopt you, we'll teach you our ways, but you have to wear clothes. I'm saying all of that to say, how many generations does it take to erase an indigenous person? One, that's it. And we want to judge these people for not wanting to be around people who practice idolatry in their minds, or who are pagans or heathens in their minds, or kafirs, right? Because today in 2022, how many of us sons and daughters of Native people would bring someone in our home who's wearing fetish charms on their waist today in 2022? Would we accept this? How would you expect them to accept it back then, when they were less open-minded than we are?
Oh, yeah.
So part of becoming Liberian was acculturation. And this is just a fact of history. They didn't accept our traditional practices because they were Christians, and they believed in Christianity, and they did not believe that. But in fact, that's not what they didn't believe. They believed that our traditional practices were demonic.
The demonic.
So,
It was against God.
Call, on one hand, you're saying separation, as the way people think about it, did not exist. On the other hand, you are saying the cultures couldn't mingle, and so they had reason not to open up to certain indigenous, because the way
it was conditional.
It was what?
It was conditional. And Edward Wilmot Blyden was not happy with this. There were some immigrants that came later after the Republic was established that were not happy with this. Blyden converted to Islam. He was like, you know what, this is a better deal. I like Islam. I'm a Muslim now. He learned how to read and write Arabic. And he thought that Islam was a better faith for African people. And there were others who were like, you know what? There's nothing wrong with idolatry, especially those descendants of recaptured Africans from places like Dahomey, which is now Benin and Nigeria, people from Congo region. A lot of those people brought their beliefs, their hardcore traditional African religious beliefs, to the Grain Coast with them. And when they were educated, Christianized, and became powerful in society, they continued to practice these things underground for generations.
And even looking at it today, let's just come to it today. Now, we get to understand the past if we just look at ourselves a little bit today. Today, we got problem with, if you just tell somebody that I'm not a Christian, they're like, oh, so you don't know God. They freaked out in the first place. So imagine at that time how heavy it was. And there was other things into play at that time. When these people that came, they had firsthand interactions with these Westerners and their suppressive, oppressive hate towards us. And there were indigenous people that were still interacting with these people, not knowing what really was happening on the other sides of the show. Like today, if I can tell people that I really don't like the whole movement from Africa to Europe and Australia, what we're doing today. I said, no, 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 there's a whole agenda behind this. Oh, and you still there? They still don't believe some of the things that we experience here and some of the things that happened. So those people had to put certain things in place to make our people to agree with us. Don't forget, some of them were agreeing with the British on the other side. Some of them were agreeing with the French on the other side. How could we make them understand? How could they make them understand? It's not what it seems. So let's go to the time. There was a lot of things in play that brought up all that, I
And this,
think.
yeah, and everyone did not have this. It's important to know. So even some of the Christians, like Hillary Teague, he's responsible for some pretty powerful changes to that draft Greenleaf Constitution. If you look at Article 3, this is Hillary Teague. All men have a natural and inalienable right to worship God according to the dictates of their own consciences.
Consciences, yes.
There's nothing like that comparable in the Western world in 1847.
No,
Nothing.
that wasn't.
I mean, unless you want to talk about the French Revolution. But wow, the American Constitution didn't do this. According to their own consciences, he removed the Christian clause from the ACS draft. He said, no, Greenleaf, we're everybody has a right to their own conscience, to worship God according to their own consciences. This is Hillary Teague. Without obstruction or molestation from others. This is the law of the land. All persons demeaning themselves peaceably, not obstructing others in their religious worship, are entitled to the protection of the law. This is protecting the Muslims. This is protecting the Poro. This is protecting everybody.
Yep.
This is 1847.
Right.
And no religious test whatsoever shall be required as qualification for civil office or the exercise of any civil right. This is written into the 1847 Constitution.
That is correct.
This is accommodating indigenous people. What he's talking against is the practice of the colony. Because before Liberia became a country in 1847, ACS would not allow you to enter the colony and live among the people unless you were baptized and you did away with your faith. Many Muslim people gave up their religion.
We are having a problem with your audio.
Okay, let me go out and come back. This happens all the time. I think every time I get passionate, my devices give up on me. I'll come back in.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Tanneh-Chewlae.
Welcome back to Focus on Liberia. This is our Independence Day. We say happy Independence Day to all Liberians and friends of Liberia. Well, dual citizen is now the law of the land. And so if you are an American citizen, the idea that don't ask, don't tell no longer exists. So we're all Liberians as we continue to preach here. Tonight we are talking about our founding fathers, and that include my own man, John Day.
John Day. Okay. Okay. John Day was born 1797. He was born a free man. He was a merchant, and he wanted, when he got his pastor's license, or his British preacher, his Baptist license, he wanted to go to Haiti. I just want to make that point, because at that time, Haiti, don't forget, Haiti had done that revolution, so they were already against Haiti. So they refused him going to Haiti because I believe that he had that fire of freedom in him. So why would he want to go to Haiti? Definitely he was going to carry other ideas there. So they did not, the Baptist Foreign Board did not allow him to go. But anyway, in 1830, they sponsored him to Liberia. And when he arrived, he lost his wife and his 5 children from the diseases or whatever on the coast.
Malaria, most likely.
Yeah, malaria was there. Anyway, so anyways, and he was one of the fathers that signed the declaration. But I just stated those things because I want us, my main thing here, I want us to get in the headspace of these people. I just want us to feel like them at the time. That's what I really want us to get. So imagine you go into a foreign land, you go into a foreign place, but it's also your people, right? They look like you. You don't know what you're going to meet there, and then you arrive, you lost your family, it's just you there, but still he had that fire of freedom and he fought for that. So yeah.
I wonder how you got to Basel.
So the reason, what you have to remember, Dennis, there were colonies all along the coast.
Yeah.
Everybody was, so you had the colony, you know, we've talked about this, the different colonization societies, the Mississippi Colonization Society. So all of these coastal, what became counties at independence, were separate colonies that then went under the Commonwealth of Liberia in 1835 before independence. So ships went directly, you know, people did not just, everybody didn't go to Cape Mesurado or to what was called, you know, the colony at Liberia. Some people were going to Greenville, some people were going to Harper. So
yeah, depending on what.
Yeah, so it was, Buchanan was a destination. And then Amos Herring was born in 1793. He died in 1873. He was one of the longest living original signers of the Declaration. He was also a Presbyterian missionary, philosopher, and religious leader and educator as well. He was a teacher. So Amos Herring educated quite a number of Liberians in Bassa, converted, you know, unnameable, uncountable people to Christianity. You know, he's one of those who are responsible for what they call the Congo Bassa people, the early converts to Christianity and the early westernized Bassa people, because of his schools and his hard work in the area.
Right, and let me go back to my friend John Day. Are there Day people? Do we get that name today? Or because is that why the Basel people use a lot of days? Monday, Sunday?
No.
Right.
That's not
I did ask my girlfriend, she's Basel, right? I actually did ask her about this day name. I'm like, is this day name a traditional name, or because we got gay and all of that? But she said she don't think so. But I really did ask her about the day. The day name sounded very local.
So when Bassa people were, because of the work of some of these guys, John Day and Harding and all these ministers that went, they were very early. I would use the word converts to Western culture. So what they started to do when you're adopting a new culture, then my daughter's born on Sunday, I'm going to name my daughter Sunday Ma. Oh, I'm going to name my son Monday Ma. But as far as the traditional name Day and Gay and all these things, these are native names. It has nothing to do with the word D-A-Y.
Right.
Day, Gay, these are native indigenous Liberian names. Gray, yeah, these are our traditional indigenous names.
I'm familiar with most of these names, but when I think of Day, I've never met anyone with that surname of Day in Liberia. I wonder why. What are that?
Oh, D-A-Y?
Yeah.
Well, Amos just said
we have D-A-Y-E.
Died, right?
Excuse me?
His children all died. His wife and children died.
Children all died, and he died very early after early after the independence stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he died in 1859. His family all perished, and then he died. 2 years after.
That explains it.
Yeah, so he didn't have no child.
I mean, some people did adopt people and give their children their names, but in this
Yeah.
particular case, I'm not sure. And he may have adopted children who took on his name. I'm just not aware.
Yeah, we haven't met. I haven't met any Tay person yet.
And from 1854 to 1859. All right. So if we have day persons, if you are watching this show, please get in touch with Focus on Liberia. We are doing
We want to know who you are.
You want to know?
Yeah.
So then we have Anthony William Gardner. He was born in 1820. So I want you to think about how young he was.
Yeah.
This was the youngest. And he was a very, very young man when he sat on that committee. Think about this. You know, most of his peers on that committee, talk about youth representation. You know, he would have been 27 years old. Most of these men on this committee were significantly older than he was. And he played a very important role. And then he went on to show how ambitious and brilliant he was. He became president. He became the 9th president of Liberia.
Yeah.
He established the True Whig Party.
And I believe that was on his CV when he was running. He probably campaigned.
I was an original signer of our, declaration. I'm an original signer. I'm a founding member of this country. I'm a foundational father.
Oh, yeah.
Vote for me, Anthony William Gardner. I'm a foundational father of the state. You know.
Or if you fast forward, he will say, "You know who you're talking to?"
No.
All right.
we were here. And Ephraim Tyler. I always call him Tyler.
Yeah, I don't know, man. This situation. You know, on the oldest document, it's supposed to be Tiller, Tiller.
Okay.
It's supposed to be Tiller, sorry.
And what do we know about him?
So that's not Tyler, it's Tiller, Tiller.
Yeah.
So I apologize.
Tiller.
As you can see, I don't edit things. Not much. Not a whole lot. So one of the things I do not do with these people, I don't just rely on I try to go back to primary sources and not just rely on what is out there. So I was not able to find any primary source biographical information about Ephraim Tiller. And nor was I able to see his landing papers. You know how we have the whole manifest of all these ships that came before 1838. So it's possible he came after 1838, and I, didn't see that, or he could have just already been there. But yeah, I wasn't able to find anything on him, but he was one of the signers, and that's all I know. But you all are free to research him as well.
Right.
But Ephraim, again, from Grand Bassa. And the thing is, that Bassa thing, I'm just very suspect with a lot of people that signed it. And plenty of people are Bassa people. Plenty of people are Bassa. At least a couple of these people I suspect. But you can't find anything on them. They're probably Bassa people.
They're probably...
You can't see their name on the ship or anything.
The Bassa people will be the first ones to be saying, "Oh, the people did this to us." I mean, a lot of Bassa people kind of like, "Oh," but I like the way that people dress it, kind of voluntarily converted. And then, these guys speaking like, this foreign language, and they're taking all their women. So the Bassa guys too, they say, I go and join that mission. I'm going to school. These people taking all our women. I go and get some of their Western culture too, so I can find a good wife. Who knows?
Right. So deal with that Bassa people claiming they're Congo.
Yeah, I suspect things about some of these are Bassa people, but I'm gonna leave it at that because I don't have any evidence to support my thoughts. But again, I wasn't able to see any landing papers for our friend Mr. Tiller.
Let's leave it at that and go to Sino. There were people from Sino too, man. Jacob W. Prout.
Yep, he was the secretary of the convention.
There was just not much on him.
Robert Murray. Uh,
Didn't find anything on him either.
so when you start going, one of the beautiful things that happens when you go from Bassa, even Maryland and all of these places, is that there was so much integration in the coastal cultures.
Yeah.
You know, Sino especially, when those people arrived from Mississippi, because they were already very used to interacting with Europeans and other Westerners, because they were traders. They were much more, and they spoke broken English already when these people arrived. That's the other thing people don't realize. A lot of these people on the coast already spoke broken English. In fact, they could communicate with the Spaniards and the Portuguese and the English, and the settlers or the repatriated Africans could only speak English. So the existing people, the existing population, would, if you wanted to interact with this Portuguese guy, it would be the crew guy or the gribble guy that would be speaking the Portuguese and translating for you. He would be speaking the Spanish and translating for you because they only spoke English. But our coastal people, especially these guys that were the traders, the ones that were going between the ships, they spoke broken fragments of all of these European languages because they were interacting with them. So what ends up happening in places like Sino, Greenville, Harper, is you see massive integration of the population, of the coastal population. Now, this is not a conversation about my ancestors, my biological ancestors in Nimba, or places like Grand Jita, or places like Bopuru. I'm talking about the immediate coastal places where they settled and were experiencing levels of prosperity. There was a lot of integration. And in fact, outside of the settlement at Cape Mazarata, when you start going further east, there's no separation between the communities, really. So you've got the indigenous population intermingled, and a lot of these guys already had Western names before ACS and the other colonization societies arrived, because they were already adopting European names. A lot of them were already Christian because they had missionaries up and down the coast long before 1822. So many people were already Christian, or already had, were already peripheral Christians, as they're described, that they wanted. So it's not like they never knew about Christianity. Or Islam is also very dominant religion because of the traders, these long distance traders. So the idea that they're interacting with people who had no clue about anything is absurd. I mean,
right.
you got,
that is very important about, like these people, you said it, that they had no clue. They interacted with Europeans even before they settled.
For generations.
Yeah.
And traveled. A lot of the people you're talking about a time period when a lot of these guys will get on ships, serve as ship hands, go as far as Liverpool, go as far as Brazil, go to the Caribbean, and come back home and tell stories about how I went to this place, I saw this, and then there will be, all the girls in the community will come and sit at their feet and listen to their travel stories. Right?
Yeah, of course.
So we have a culture of this already on the Grain Coast. We have a culture of this among our people already. So when they see these westernized, repatriated Africans coming, they're so happy. They're like, oh, they saw kinship in them. So there's more integration in those places. So I'm not saying, do not misquote me. I am not saying that John Lewis and all of these people, without a doubt, were Bassa people. I am saying that name, Nesta Law, is strange for the Western. I can't find the name anywhere outside of this context. And it's possible his mom or dad just made it up, or he just made it up, or it's possible it's a perversion of an indigenous name. We have to find this out. We have to research this. We have to get to the bottom of it. But there's, that's all I'm saying. But the probability is there. The probability is there.
The probability is there.
If you're watching and want to join the conversation, 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403. You can also drop us your comments and we're going to read it. This is focused on Liberia, the Liberia History Channel. We come to you every Saturday at 7. Today is Independence Day, and we thought to do it on Independence Day. Wherever you are, hope or you are enjoying the show. Even if you're going to watch later, keep it right here at Focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. And I tell you the truth, you can't find this anywhere else on the planet. I'm just saying.
And also, we should also let our people know that they should also try to read the Constitution so that they can know a lot of things that were written in there, that there was no law set against any indigenous person, against any citizen of the land. At least let them know that.
Yeah,
there was no law set.
powerful.
Every law was set for everybody. Everybody was under the umbrella of the law. So it's very important that Liberians get to know their constitution and their rights.
So one of the things that happens, I find, AMA and Dennis, is that the people just say things. Like I've heard somebody say, oh, they said you had to own land in order to be a citizen. That's not anywhere.
No, that isn't.
Now, do you have to own land before you run for office? That's different.
Mm-hmm.
And then saying that indigenous people didn't own land is not true, because they put in protectionary land rights in the Constitution.
In the Constitution, yeah.
So interpretation is everything. So I had somebody say, oh, they said you shouldn't buy land from Native people. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? They were trying to discriminate. They didn't want the people to sell their land. If they're trying to discriminate, why wouldn't they want the people to sell their land? Is that not to protect their sovereignty, their land sovereignty? They're telling you, if you have become educated and you have joined the republic as a citizen, within our territory, there are sovereign people. Respect their sovereignty. It is not the right of the people who have decided to be part of the Liberian establishment to then venture out and conquer or economically acquire territory and privatize it when it's under the protection, not the protection, but the control of various kingdoms. One, they didn't want trouble. And two, they also didn't want Europeans to continue to purchase property in the hinterlands. Because one of the issues they had was a lot of land in Cape Town had been sold to slave dealers. And so when they started to extinguish slave trade at Trade Town, Robertsport, and all these places, they had to make sure that nobody would turn around again and give some British or French person additional territory. That was part of it.
And land is a big deal.
And because of that clause in the 1847 Constitution, a majority of the land in Liberia is under the ownership, the customary land ownership of various ethnic groups in different areas. So most of the land in Grand Jita is under community land or customary land rights. Most of Nimba, most of Bong, most of Lopa, most of Bopuru. It's only the coast. But the rest of the country, the sovereignty of the people and the land was respected. And this is a fact. It is in the laws, it's written. And to this very day, if you want to do anything, you need a tribal certificate, and some traditional leader has to sign off on it. That's the only place in Africa where the land rights of the existing indigenous people was recognized by a Western state.
Thank you.
Is Liberia.
Let's review of our comments here. This one from Louis Turbot. Happy Independence Day, Mama Liberia. David Colley, happy 175 to all Liberians. Sandra Yankon, happy Independence Day, FOL. River says Pro say, who are really the founding fathers of Liberia? We name a couple of them.
We named all of them. Didn't we? Did we get down to Robert Murray?
Yeah, we did. We named all of them.
Okay.
Right. Besides those 12, I believe we should have more.
Nope, that's it. Well, when we talk about founding fathers of a country, it's usually those who drafted the Constitution and wrote the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
We're not saying all the men that lived in the country. We're talking about those leaders who were nominated by their people to go and represent them to
People represent
create
them. Yeah.
sovereignty for themselves. So this is all of them.
Dave Colley said, do your panelists agree we would have been better off gaining independence from colonial rule?
No, I don't.
First of all, what kind of question is that?
If you are not colonized, how do you gain independence from colonial rule?
Then it's not everything anyway. You got to read it because you're a nice guy. I wouldn't even read that.
No,
I don't know.
Sometimes I want to get what people are thinking and how we can.
Yeah.
I don't understand what he's asking. Amy, do you know what he's asking?
No, he's asking if we're going to be better off if we were colonized by French or British and then gain our independence. That's what he's asking.
It's a different form of slavery. If you say the colonization of all our brothers and sisters around us, we Africans have to know that it's just a different form of being colonized. People don't own anything for themselves. Everything is run by these people.
The answer is no.
It's no. We can never.
The answer is just no.
One thing I'll say, Brother Dennis, is this: if Liberia has a kitchen, I am very proud of that kitchen because that kitchen is my kitchen. I stick to that kitchen, what that kitchen should be. I got all rights over that kitchen. No other person in any foreign land has the right on top of my kitchen until I can afford to build a 1-bedroom. The kitchen is mine.
So I think
answer that it says there will be no Liberia. The land will have been divided and colonized between Britain and France, brother. In fact, Liberia was a lot larger, but both France and Britain saw lots of it.
Exactly.
Dr. Carr, another member of the Liberian History Guild, has spoken. So, hi, Doctor. All right, who's an actual professional historian, by the way.
Yeah.
But he's correct, Dennis. He's 100% correct because after the partitioning of Africa, after the Berlin Conference, and there was resistance. Sekou Touré resisted. I said Sekou Touré. Samori, King of Samori Touré resisted. That's the great grandfather of Sekou Touré. King Samori Touré resisted after the partitioning of Africa and actually succeeded in creating a state. We talked about it in the previous episode, but keeping the French at bay, he fought them, and then they manipulated and used other Africans against him, eventually conquering him. But after that, there was no real option. So the descendants of the Wusulu Empire descended into the Liberian territory for refuge. That was the last great migration. We don't talk about it much. We talk about, Mali, we say, the people came from ancient Mali. The real big influx in recent times were the descendants of Samori Touré's Wusulu Empire. After the French conquered, they did not want to live under the French, and they descended into Liberia. Samori himself was able to keep them at bay for as long as he did because he went to Liberian territory for refuge. And he stayed there protected. It ended up being other Africans that penetrated that region and were able to conquer him at last. Yeah. But he was not safe in any French or British territory. It's Liberia where he sought refuge. And it's Liberia where they could not have passed through Monrovia. They had to come through Ivory Coast together. So,
and Cole, what others don't realize is what we have today as Liberia did not exist as Liberia. So
right.
If people could talk about colonization, you wouldn't have the 43,000 square miles being colonized by anybody. It would be, peace here and there. So you wouldn't have Liberia.
In fact, we would have been mostly French with a small slither going to the British.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say the way that they had planned, the evil plans they had for us, only really maybe Cape Mount and part of Bomi would have gone to Sierra Leone. The rest of us would be Ghanaian or Ivorian.
Yeah. So
that's it.
So the concept, this whole concept, because I've heard it many times, especially during the war when we were suffering, people. But let me bring in a few callers here.
Okay.
Let's bring in a few callers here. The first here is our friend Evan Morris. Evan, you're live.
Yeah, are you on 548?
Oh, sorry, Darling Warwood. Darling, you're live. Evan's drop out.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Darling.
It's me, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
And
Thank you guys for having.
welcome back. You've been gone forever.
Yeah, I've been going forever because of some of the funny guests you've been having on the show.
Oh, you were striking. All right, go ahead. Let me hear your question or comments.
So, I would just throw light on three issues quickly because I know other people have to talk. The first is I want to say that those ex-slaves that were brought to Liberia, they were not patriotic to Liberia. They never loved the country. I think they find that they had an opportunity to be somewhere where they could be free and do a backflip and own slaves and do whatever they wanted to do with anybody and have access to excess money. It was something that they cherished, and everybody will cherish that. But with that freedom, with that access to excess money, came nothing. Absolutely nothing. And when they were brought to Liberia, they really never detached themselves from their former colonial master or slave masters or where they came from. They never detached themselves altogether. Because imagine right after their kids graduated from high school in Liberia, they sent them to America. They have homes, expensive mansions here in America. They lay down roots, better roots here in America than even the place they were living and taking money from. And so as a result, because they didn't consider this place their country, their home, they really never had any system put in place.
Who is can you ask him for clarity? He's saying they. Who is he talking about?
Yeah, Darling, when you said that they are sending their children back, who?
I'm talking about the ex-slaves.
Okay.
The descendants of ex-slaves.
So you're saying, let me get clarification. I'm confused by your comments. You're saying that in the 1800s they were getting money and sending their children to America?
Say that again?
In the 1800s, let's say from
This
1847 to
is about
1890.
1847. What are you talking about?
Were they getting money and sending their children to America those days? Is that what you saying?
What I'm saying is not restricted to 1800. Lastly, it happens in the beginning and in the middle part of the 1900s.
Okay, so not the original people. They are children.
No, they are descendants.
Okay.
Are you talking about the 20th century, or are you talking about the 19th century? I'm confused.
They did not put into place any system.
Who is they?
Imagine what is suffering from today, the lack of system, is because there was no foundation for a system. In fact, what they did was even our budget. How do we get to know that even our country had a budget? It happened later when Ellie Johnson started into power. When the rule of the ex-slave descendants, there was not even a budget discussion. People that were representing, so I would just transition to apartheid.
Okay. Dennis, can you ask him some questions and not allow him to just say things that aren't true?
Thank you.
Yeah. So the saying that there's no such thing as a budget is not true. Everything's documented. The problem I have sometimes is when people call in and they state very passionate opinions about things they have no idea about. And saying that we never had a national budget until Ellen Johnson Sirleaf came to the country is absurd.
You said we didn't know about it. It was there, but government didn't know.
I mean, Samuel Doe, even during Charles Taylor's time, I mean, come on, even when the country was in war and strife, just because you don't know something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And to be so passionate about something, have such a strong opinion about something that you don't know anything about, it's strange.
Thank you. Let me bring one more caller here. Evis Morris, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Dry. I just wanted to say thanks for the show tonight. Thanks to Ms. Carl and the other panelists for having the time to share with us. I mean, happy independence to us. I have some things to say, but Because it's Independence Day, I'm just not going to say I'm going to be happy for us, and I just want to tell you guys thank you for the show tonight. That's all.
All right. Happy Independence.
Thanks for calling, Elvis.
And your friend Carla Genesis is watching.
His best friend.
Next caller here, 323 Iroquois. Your name and where you calling from?
Happy Independence.
Same to you, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. This is Les Wills, and I wanted to call your show. I'm a devoted follower. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. Your name again, please.
Oh, okay. I'm Les Wills.
Oh, Les.
I'm calling from Los Angeles.
Thank you.
I just want to ask all the people who, I just want us to realize that people of the 19th and 20th century were a lot different. They had a different mindset than the people of our century. And people don't seem to realize that. I think everyone that, oh my goodness, I know you can hear, everyone that is disparaging of the miracles that the pioneers that came to Liberia don't realize that they had a mindset, a Christian mindset. They were not going to assimilate with people that did not believe in that Christian mindset. And many of them realized that they were going to die. That's a whole different mindset than people today. We respect everybody's culture today. But in those days, they did not. And I like to ask all the listeners that can't seem to understand that concept, if they look back on their own families of like their grandfather's generation. Were those people Christian? Because I imagine most Liberians consider themselves to be Christians or Muslims today. But were their grandfathers that way? You see, Liberians have changed, but it seems like the people that have become Christians look back at the old Christians, the pioneers, and want to criticize them for being the way they are, even though they are Christians today. So I think that's what I basically want to say. We have to understand the mindset of people of that century as opposed to the people of today. And,
fair point.
If you can't do that, then I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Thank you. And I like how Dr. Brewer always calls it, don't read history backwards, because my grandfather, they were not Christians, and I don't even know how Christians today relate to people that are not Christian. And I think you made a point earlier. And so go back in the 19th century and see how that interaction went. Thank you for your contribution. Let me bring on the next caller here. That's go ahead.
You bet.
Thank you.
And you have a wonderful show. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. Thanks for watching.
All right.
Mr. Eastman, you are live. Jimmy.
Hey, Dennis, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Happy Independence Day.
Yeah, thank you, and I wish every Liberian out there a very happy 26.
By the way, Jimmy, this is a perfect opportunity to give focus on Liberia, our 26. I don't know why nobody is giving us 26.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, the focus has done a lot. It does a lot for us.
And we are now tax deduct 501c3, so your donations will be good and tax deduct. But go ahead with your comments and questions, Jimmy. You're part of us.
Oh, yes. It was terrible to hear that last caller. For some people, the narrative has caused them to believe what they believe. And this is what I wanted to commend Call first. Call, your research is extensive. I have never seen anybody has done as much research and has such balanced revelations as you do. I just want to commend you. You are outstanding. You call a spade from both angles. Okay, so I just want to put that at your feet there, Carl. But Dennis, Liberia is a story of survival. That's what people don't really understand. It is a story of survival. The people did not want to be where they were. They did not like where they were as being subhuman. And they took the risk. They say, that is where I'm coming from. They stole my people from the villages, and now I'm going back. I know I've heard all kinds of stuff there, but it's better than being here. And when they came back to Africa, it was different. They wasn't used to the culture. The culture was completely different when they had known. They had been there for hundreds of years. They didn't know anything about what they were going to meet. So it was a shock to them. And the only playbook they had to go by was that playbook what the missionaries used to colonize Africa, that playbook that the imperialists and the colonists used to enslave Africa. So they had no playbook. And they still said, okay, we're going to come here. So they came. And the ACS, after 20-some more years, said, well, you're on your own now. They didn't help them. And they had to establish and persevere regardless of colonial powers trying to come nearby to take their land, to make them not worthy. They still say they're going to have to survive. So the last caller said, what did these people do? Look, these people established
Jimmy, briefly, if you can if you can conclude, so we can get more callers.
Yeah. So okay. Let me conclude quick. These court systems, the school systems, we have postal systems. We have various systems that were working in Liberia. They were not the best, but we had systems that were working. We had people when the traffic light come on, you will stop. We had police systems. We had all kinds of medical systems. We had systems established, and those were working. There were many errors they made on their part, and I'm not going to go back and say why they made those errors, but they survived. If they didn't think they would survive, but they survived. And finally, when it came to the point that we're coming together to emancipate ourselves as one people, because there was a difference before, but when we're coming together as one, being led, then all of a sudden, that leader was taken away from us. We were surviving, we'll still survive. Liberia has come a long way, and we got a long way to go.
Thank you, Jimmy. Let's get our last caller here, and that's John Mawolo. John, you're live.
Yeah, good evening, and happy 26 to all the sisters out there and to you, Dennis.
Thank you.
And congratulations for the 503C. Listen, Carl, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the research that you put countless hours into. I'm sure there's a lot of you who are doing it. But I hope these things are being written. Because this new Liberia, we're going to have to re-educate the children. Most
agreed.
Third-hand information that they so passionately believe. It take a re-education of the youth to change this thing. I tell people all the time, if you only knew what those people came from, you will never accuse them of trying to come back. If you only knew. These people wanted a home for themselves. The second thing is that we always trying to blame somebody else. All the people came. The people came. You were here hundreds of years before the people came. You never formed a country. The people came and decided to put this thing on paper, and you said, why you are not part of it? You couldn't read and understand English. How could you be a part of it? Listen, we got to be frank and fair to ourselves when we want to criticize. The same group of people since 1980 being in charge, and they're still blaming somebody else. And nothing has changed.
John,
in fact, it has gotten worse.
John, when you say the same group of people, what you mean? When you say the same group of people, what you mean?
Yes, I was so-called indigenous people, and I am a part. I'm a great grandson of King Sabaso. So I know what I'm talking about. People blame and blame and blame and blame. What is your fault? What is your fault? What haven't you done right? Oh, they didn't send our children to school. You were here thousands of years before they came. Why you didn't send your children to school? You still keeping your children. You still were selling each other. And you want to blame somebody else. If we don't put this thing aside and live together as brother and sister, we all got something to complain about. We all got something to be blamed for. We need to now look at the future of our children and our country.
Thank you,
because
John.
this nonsense that people tend to believe is only dividing and crushing this country down and is of no help.
Thank you,
Look
John.
at where we are, 175 years.
Thank you, John.
We should be ashamed of ourselves.
No, I'm
And
not.
thank you, girls.
No, I wouldn't be ashamed. I'll be proud of myself. Thank you, John. You may go ahead. Your response.
First of all, the blame game, it's reached the place I can't stand the blame game anymore. And first, those that are speaking as Liberians, there's something, first of all, I've noticed in they and when we and when they, who are these they and who are the we? When we're talking, the first mistake, when we're talking of Liberia, we, not they in this thing. As a patriotic person, when you speak of your country, you speak of what you think your brother did you what is still a we. We cannot all agree and be happy with what happened in our history. History has no problem with whether I like it or not, but history is history. And true history is what we fix today with. And if you go in the Constitution, every country has good and bad people. Of course, there were people that came from America that were good and some were bad. There were indigenous people that were good and bad. That's just human character. But there is no law that was put in place by the founding fathers to go against anybody that is citizen of Liberia. So let's go back to the Constitution, because if you really vet for what a Congo man or native man is doing to you, go to the Constitution, take it and take them to court, because we all fall under the umbrella. So all these things they are saying, where were the laws that were set for people to do these things to people? If you didn't like it, take it to the law. How many Liberians take upon themselves to know what the law is, to know their constitution? None. Just few, if I would say. But when we're talking this thing, talk about it as if to say it was a law that was put in place that they can affect that this happened. It's still happening today. People taking people from the village and making them to live in Moravia and working. And people got people working with them and not sending them to school. This thing is still happening. That's just human character. But in those laws states it should happen. They got government officials that are eating money. They got representatives or people that are lying senators. It's happening still today, but it is not the law.
Right.
So this we got to understand this.
You before you end, to be
sorry,
to be fair to them. No, hold on. I got the point you're making. I just want to say, to be fair to the people saying it, not that I agree with them, but not because the Constitution is crystal clear on those things does not mean that actors will not do otherwise. Like today, the Constitution can spell out good things, but people can still do something else.
But you have the right to stand against it. You have the right to take it to court.
Here's my problem with this whole thing. We just did a presentation. We just talked about how many indigenous people were citizens of Liberia in 1850 when Gurley testified in front of Congress. It was 80,000 indigenous people. The Congos, Americo-Liberians, Congos being repatriated Africans, descendants of African Americans, were about 7,000. Who are the they that was controlling the country? The documented evidence contradicts what people are saying with their mouths. Many of the people that we are thinking came on some ship are indigenous Liberians.
Indigenous Liberians.
We have had, Vice President Dosen was an indigenous Liberian.
Liberian.
And it's clearly documented, like this information is not even hidden anywhere. People talk about this is false narrative about segregation. How can you have 80,000 citizens educated when in the history of Liberia have indigenous Liberians not participated in leadership, as judges, as secretaries, which are now called ministers, as teachers, and also as self-determinant business people? I had a conversation with somebody and I said, oh, Tanneh-Chewlae was one of the richest men in Liberia. Oh, a crew man, how? The man had one of the biggest rubber farms in the country. He served as a representative. That's not true. No native man was representative before this. I mean, it's just not true. And a lot of times we just go off of someone's name. Like Salia Burnell, for example. A lot of these guys in the Southeast had Western names. He was 100% Gribble man. The late Mary Burnell's father was the son of a Gribble ruler or chief. And he was a Gribble man. His name was Burnell. So when you become educated now, you're from America. The whole narrative is confused. And we've repeated this lie so often that even when we see evidence to the contrary, we can't comprehend it, we can't process it.
It's true.
We just spent 2 hours talking about a constitution and how people were not discriminated against in the Constitution. Then we have intelligent people call in and say everybody was listen. There's not one homogenous group of people called Native people, and there's not one homogenous group of people called settlers. Even among the African Americans who repatriated, they had different ideologies and different belief systems.
That's true.
Hillary Teague did not think anything like Joseph Jenkins Roberts. You had people like Barkley, E.J. Roy, who came from the States, a very forward-thinking, successful business person in the trenches of America, where he wasn't even considered a human being, was able to amass wealth, owned a building in the United States. And because of pressure from imperialists, he almost escaped to Haiti and decided to go to Liberia, where he established himself. E.J. Roy owned his own ship. He built his wealth before even emigrating to Liberia. And he was sabotaged in the worst way. The treachery of our people against our people is the problem.
It's the problem.
We're easily weaponized and incited against ourselves. All you have to do is go tell somebody this person is from this, and that's it. They will burn down the republic. Liberia exists today in spite of the treachery of its own citizens against its nation.
Its nation.
And until when people start to really clear their minds and examine the evidence of the past, clear their minds from the propaganda and lies, and truly examine the evidence of the past. And it's not only indigenous people. I remember watching an episode of Dinah Samir's show, and there was a woman who's from up St. Paul River and says that she was an American Liberian. I mean, just talking about her parents, her family had a deed before since 1822, all kinds of nonsense that's just not true. Because herself has been miseducated and brainwashed and doesn't understand her own history. No, you didn't have a deed in 1822. You didn't own anything until Liberation Day. July 26, 1847, you own nothing. You were just squatting on property that ACS allowed your people to live on. So they don't even, even the descendants, the legitimate descendants of the repatriated Africans don't even understand their own history.
No.
And because they're engulfed in their own prejudice, modern prejudice, they impose and project that upon their ancestors, most of whom didn't carry that prejudice. I always say this 1847 Constitution had been written by modern so-called Congo people, it would not have been so correctly liberal. It would have been horrible, because their descendants betrayed their struggle.
What it stood for.
Their descendants betrayed their struggle in the early 20th century. And if you follow the map of transaction in Liberia and development in Liberia, they broke after the Berlin Conference and the subsequent economic embargo that was against Liberia and Haiti and any Black people that tried to stand up and be sovereign. They broke down and they cowered and they didn't do the courageous things that Hillary Teague and Elijah Johnson did.
Yeah.
So we cannot project and have a conversation about broken people who betrayed the struggle and project that upon the founding principles of our country.
Thank you.
It's two different things, two different time periods, two different eras.
Thank you. And don't forget, this Saturday, we're going to continue with the literary hour. This is a special one. Carl, let's conclude on our presentation here. The last slide.
Yeah, so basically this is just, the Commonwealth Constitution. We didn't really get a chance to examine our Constitution. The 1847 Constitution PDF is available online. You could just Google it. PDF, Liberia 1847 Constitution. This particular document is the Constitution of the Commonwealth, which was written by ACS board members in the United States. Compare and contrast this document with what Hillary Teague, Elijah Johnson, and all these great men put together. It is a complete contradiction. The 1847 Constitution is so far more progressive than this document. It bothers me that people would want to credit ACS with establishing Liberia. They absolutely did not. Hang on, I'll be back.
We're going to go to some shows that are coming up. Let's start with this Thursday. We're going to continue on the independence. Really, the way we think about the independence, there was a purpose why Liberia was established. So
Definitely.
Are we in line with that purpose? Is it something that we have accomplished so far? Is it something that is coming? What really does independence mean to you? And if you are giving your own Independence Day oration, I know you've watched several Independence Day orations this year, what will be yours? Coming up on Tough Talking Thursday, we're going to be talking about Independence Day. Is it dream deferred? Someone will want to ask. Is it a reality? What does it mean for Liberia to be independent? What is the story we should be telling about our Independence Day today? Don't forget, it is happening on Thursday at 7 p.m. on Tough Talking Thursday. Then on Friday, we have the literary hour. Dr. Robtel Pele is going to be our guest. You should join Scholar Jackie Salia and Professor K. Moses Nabwit as they'll be interviewing Dr. Pele on her book, Development, Dual Citizenship and Its Discontent in Africa. You don't want to miss that. Then on Sunday at 1 p.m., there's a young fellow. His parents are Fulani. He was born and raised in Liberia. He's trying to get his Liberian citizenship and it's been difficult. He will be here to talk about what he called discrimination faced by members of the Fulani community in Liberia, the case of Hassan Jallo. Hassan is going to be here. He's going to be my guest Sunday at 1 p.m. and we're going to talk about that. Also, Sunday, we're going to have gospel artist Fatou Zion, the girl who said, "Who is behind me?" You are wasting your time. My guest, and we're going to go into a career and an upcoming concert in Philadelphia. Don't miss it. Always watch. Focus on Liberia. And there's a reason why they call me the well-rounded. Don't miss it. I knew you were gonna get a laugh out of that. Time is fast spent. Let's wrap this up. Let's wrap this up. And before I even get to your wrap up, the Declaration of I don't want to start a new show. Let's wrap it up. Because I want to also look at the Declaration of Independence and then some in the Constitution, and maybe kind of have a little comparison, but we'll do that.
We can do that another. We can do another one. So here's my wrap up. and I'll leave the final word to our guest. But what Liberian people have to realize is that every country was established as a vision, as an idea, as something to work towards. And the people who establish the country are usually the people who write preambles, declarations of independence. People who draft constitutions are supposed to be the brightest among the citizenry, the people, right? So you read the US Constitution, it's a genius piece of work. It's philosophical. It's something for everyone to work towards. It's the same with the Liberian Constitution. There's nothing in that Constitution that dehumanizes anyone. However, in practice, where people mean and wicked, where people do bad things, absolutely. The idea of a country is that you work towards attaining the bright future picture that was painted for it. You sit in, most of the people watching sit in America, where in my lifetime, right in Cumming, Georgia, Black people were not allowed to live there. They were still killing Black people just for going there. In my lifetime, in the 1980s, this was happening. Up to the early 90s, you had actual lynchings in New York City because someone went to Sheepshead Bay, a Black guy, to date a white girl and was murdered. The atrocities committed on US soil against African people continue to this day. Yet, we sit in Liberia and we're angry about things, and we're projecting things onto people that didn't do the things that we're saying that they did. Were they discriminatory in the sense of, oh, I don't want my daughter marrying this person? Yes. Did they prevent anyone from going to school? The answer is no. Every institution of education that was built in Liberia from 1822 to present, with the exception of a couple of Lebanese schools that do not allow Liberians to attend, every institution had indigenous students from the very inception of the first colony in this country. There has been integrated schools. Everyone went to school together. Everyone went to church together. This is a fact. This is an indisputable fact. And it doesn't jive with the lie that we keep repeating that was told to us and is being told to our children. And you, in the face of great evidence to the contrary, we still consider this to be apartheid? This is ridiculous. My last and closing statement is this. My name is Call. I'm from Nimba, from a place called Ga Clan in the Ganta area of Nimba. And guess what? My ancestors in 1822 were not stateless. They had a country, they had a government, they had their own laws, they had their own spiritual and religious beliefs.
Yes.
They were not sitting around waiting for some westernized Negroes to give them a country. We became Liberian out of necessity. After the partitioning of Africa, even though we existed within the territory, we were sovereign. After the partitioning of Africa, the options for us were Guinea or Liberia. My forefathers chose Liberia. We are Liberian by choice. Look at the map. Where Nimba and Lofa reach into Guinea, that is what you call resistance. That is territory that we fought to maintain. We all have a stake in this country. This vision is something that we are responsible to work towards. And in order to do so, you must understand it. Go back and read it. Let us work towards attaining it.
Thank you.
Let us work towards a more perfect nation, non-union. Are you me?
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. I will just start to close it by um Article 5, Section 13. The great object of forming these colonies being to provide a home for the dispersed and oppressed children of Africa, and to regenerate and enlighten this benighted continent. None but Negroes or persons of Negro descent shall be eligible to citizenship in this republic. That was the object, one of the objects, right, of forming this nation. And whatever mistake that you or me think they made, they believed in us to take the touch to correct it. That's why you also go to Article 17 that tells you you are able to alter the Constitution. So if we felt or we feel that something is not right, it is to us to go by the system and protocols to change that which is going to be for the good of all. Yes, there were mistakes. And we are still continuing the same mistakes. The narrative of segregation is blinding me. Is the narrative of segregation has gotten us nowhere. The Congo people were dead, the Native people were dead. We have gotten nowhere because of that narrative. We did the coup because of that narrative. We brought the war because of that narrative. We are hector-scatter like stray dogs all over the world, doing nothing to progress that which was started. So please, I'm just asking Liberians, broaden your perspective, open your mind. Let's do this together. Only us can do it. No American, nobody, only you and me can do this. Please, let's do it. Thank you.
On that note, I will say we are all Liberians, and that's why we close with the song that says, no matter you are Gio, Mano, Crown, Crew, Gribble, Bele, or Fula, Mandingo, whoever you are, Lebanese, we find ourselves right there in the country.
Negro.
Well,
no Negro.
That's another thing, right? Because how can we really tell this non-Negro?
Negro.
We are all Liberians. We must do whatever it takes to go to that original intent of making Liberia the Lone Star forever, the glorious land of labor. And that's why we play the song that says, we are all Liberians.
We are all Liberians.
And
thank you for having us.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home. Liberia people. Liberia.